There was a Taoist sage, later than Lao Tzu. His name was Liezi, and he had a reputation for being able to ride on the wind. So light. Zhuangzi says in one place, it's easy enough to stand still. The difficulty is to walk without touching the ground. Because in the state of being in accord with the Tao, there is a certain feeling of weightlessness.
China is going to change the world in two fundamental respects. First of all, it's a huge developing country with a population of 1.3 billion people, which has been growing for over 30 years at around 10% a year. And within a decade, it will have the largest economy in the world. Never before in the modern era has the largest economy in the world been that of a developing country rather than a developed country. Secondly, for the first time in the modern era, the dominant country in the world, which I think is what China will become, will be not from the West and from very, very different civilizational roots.
哎呀，就疯掉了！把我们历史学也有人打。你没写？
我1米8。
1米8呀？
1米8。
我们历史学也那么高，也那么高。
这么高啊？
他的那个。
42上千。
上千呐？
那49，2根都上千。
上千好哎。
那这是个复活过啊。其他我都不看，主要看你生命线。我看有点失眠啊。有点失眠不咋地。今年有点4分口才老太婆。
4分，今年呐？就是2001。
有点4分口什么已经快过了哈。一脱手就今年啷家搬迁。搬迁家里面。
家里面不搬迁，今年不搬迁。
冬秋大节。接地没得平常灾难经验啊。
I don't believe that China will ever, in my lifetime or maybe my children's lifetime, be equal to the United States militarily speaking, but they are very careful to avoid any engagement in war. They are basically a peaceful country, which gives them another advantage over the United States when we are much more inclined to go to war for various reasons.
The United States believes the people of China deserve the fundamental liberty that is the natural right of all human beings. So America stands in firm opposition to China's detention of political dissidents and human rights advocates and religious activists. We speak out for a free press, freedom of assembly, and labor rights, not to antagonize China's leaders, but because trusting its people with greater freedom is the only way for China to develop its full potential.
Now, I know it's a widespread assumption in the West that as countries modernize, they also westernize. This is an illusion. It's an assumption that modernity is a product simply of competition, markets, and technology. It is not. It is also shaped equally by history and culture. China is not like the West, and it will not become like the West. Now, the big question here is obviously, well, how do we make sense of China? How do we try and understand what China is? And the problem we have in the West at the moment, by and large, is that the conventional approach is that we understand it really in Western terms using Western ideas. We can't.
The Tao is not a manufacturer, and it's not a governor. It doesn't rule, as it were, in the position of a king. Although the book, the Tao Te Ching, is written for many purposes, but one of its important purposes is as a manual of guidance for a ruler. And what it tells him is essentially, rule by not ruling. Don't lord it over the people. And so he says the great Tao flows everywhere, both to the left and to the right. It loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them. Then is not really equivalent with any Western or Hindu idea of God. The Tao is the way all that behaves. And so the basic Chinese idea of the universe is really that it's an organism. The world is a system of interrelated components, none of which can survive without each other. Just as in the case of bees and flowers, you will never find bees around in a place where there aren't flowers, and you will never find flowers around in a place where there aren't bees or insects that do the equivalent job. And what that tells us secretly is that although bees and flowers look different from each other, they're inseparable.